My wife said the cameras were for safety, which, in hindsight, should have been my first warning sign, because the only thing remotely dangerous in our neighborhood was a raccoon that kept stealing Amazon packages and judging people from the fence like a tiny, furry landlord. "Just one," she added, leaning against the kitchen counter like she was pitching me a harmless kitchen gadget. "Near the front door, in case something happens." I looked out the window. Our street was so quiet that even the mailman walked slowly, like he didn't want to disturb the atmosphere. "The most dangerous thing here is a raccoon that keeps stealing packages," I said. "And I'm pretty sure he already owns the neighborhood." She didn't laugh. That was unusual. Normally she laughed at my jokes, even the bad ones. Especially the bad ones, because she liked to remind me they were bad. "It's just smart," she said, scrolling through something on her phone. "Everyone's doing it. Everyone. That invisible council of people who apparently decide when we switch to oat milk, buy air fryers, and install cameras. We'd been married 5 years, long enough to know each other's habits, short enough to still argue about who forgot to buy toilet paper. Life was stable, predictable. She was organized. Lists, reminders, color-coded calendars. If her brain had a desktop, it would be perfectly arranged folders. Mine looked more like someone spilled coffee on a puzzle and gave up halfway. So when she suggested the camera, I shrugged. "Sure," I said, "as long as it doesn't start judging me." She smiled. It was subtle, not warm, not amused, just satisfied. But I didn't think much of it. But it would have been necessary. The camera arrived 2 days later. Small, white, almost cute. The kind of device that looks harmless enough to babysit a plant. She mounted it near the front door while I held the ladder. "Higher?" she asked. "Little bit. Like this?" "Perfect. Now it can watch us welcome absolutely no one." She ignored that. Once it was set, she stepped back and looked at it like a proud architect. "See?" she said. "You won't even notice it." She was right. For about 3 days. Then the comments started. The first one was casual. Too casual. "You went to bed late," she said one morning while pouring coffee. I paused mid-yawn. "Yeah. Watched a movie." "You were on the couch for a long time." "Okay, that's where couches usually want you to be." She shrugged. "Just noticed." I didn't think much of it. She might have heard me, or guessed. Or maybe she'd developed husband detection radar. The next day, "You were on the phone with Mark for almost an hour." I froze while tying my shoe. "Yeah." "You sounded annoyed." "He was explaining crypto again." She nodded knowingly. "That makes sense." I walked out, but something in my brain filed it under mildly weird. Then came, "You were pacing in the hallway." "You opened the fridge a lot." "You sat there for 2 hours." Each time she said it like it was nothing, like she was commenting on the weather. "You opened the fridge 3 times, she said one evening. "Are you counting?" I asked. "There were signs." "Signs?" You left it messy." "I always leave it messy. That's not evidence, that's tradition." She smiled, always that calm, controlled smile. I started noticing how specific she was. Not, "You were up late." "You were on the couch." Not, "You had a snack." "Chips, midnight." Not, "You walked around." "You paced in the hallway." It felt like someone reading back my day from a report. At first I tried to explain it logically. She might have heard me moving. The house isn't huge, sound travels. Or maybe she just knew my routine. But then one afternoon she said, "You've been sitting too long." I looked at her. "What?" "You should stretch." "I literally just sat down." She raised an eyebrow. "You've been there a while." I leaned forward. "Are you secretly running a wellness program?" She laughed softly. "I care about you." "Do you care about me or my posture?" "Both." Still smiling. Always smiling. A few days later she said, "You looked bored around 4. I blinked. "You weren't home." "I know." "So how did you—" She cut me off. "You get bored around that time." That feeling started creeping in. Not fear, Not paranoia, just discomfort. Like when you feel someone standing behind you, but every time you turn around, no one's there. I started testing things without really thinking about it. One night, I deliberately walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, closed it, walked away, then came back and opened it again. The next morning, "You were hungry last night?" "No, I was conducting a science experiment." She gave me a look. "You opened the fridge twice." "3 times," I corrected automatically. Her smile widened just slightly. That's when it stopped being coincidence. Still, I didn't jump to conclusions. I'm not the guy who immediately thinks, my wife is secretly surveilling me. That's a big leap. That's a Netflix special. But the unease stayed. The moment everything clicked happened by accident. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't suspicious enough yet. I was just looking for my headphones. I lose them constantly. If lost items formed a union, they'd pick me as their leader. She was in the other room on the phone. Her voice was low, casual. I wasn't trying to listen. I was just passing by. Then I heard my life being summarized. "He doesn't even realize I'm keeping an eye on him." I stopped. Completely. My brain shut down every other function. If someone had yelled fire, I probably would have calmly asked them to hold that thought. "He just goes about his day like nothing's happening," she continued. A pause. Then a quiet laugh. Confident, relaxed, like someone describing a successful experiment. And suddenly everything lined up. The couch, the pacing, the chips, the fridge, the exact times, keeping an eye on him. My stomach dropped, not dramatically, more like that slow sinking feeling when you realize your card was declined in front of people. I didn't move until she ended the call. Then I walked into the kitchen like nothing happened. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, still looking for my headphones. She nodded, calm, composed, like she hadn't just confirmed she was narrating my existence to an audience. I smiled back, and in that moment, something shifted, because now I knew. And once you know you're being watched, you stop being the subject. You start planning the show. I didn't confront her, not immediately, not dramatically. No speeches, no, "we need to talk," no storming into the room like a daytime soap character. Instead, I did what any reasonable adult man would do after realizing he might be under surveillance. I made coffee. Because nothing says, I'm processing a potential domestic espionage situation, like staring into a mug and pretending your life isn't slowly turning into a low-budget psychological thriller. She walked into the kitchen a minute later. "Did you find your headphones?" she asked. "No," I said. "They're probably organizing a support group somewhere." She smiled, calm, relaxed, like she hadn't just admitted, well, not admitted, but definitely implied, she was keeping an eye on me. I watched her casually open the fridge. That's when I realized something important. If she was watching me, she expected me to keep acting normal, which meant I needed to be very, very normal. So I leaned into it. I sat on the couch that evening, turned on the TV, watched something I wasn't even paying attention to. Every now and then, I casually glanced around the room. Not obvious, just observant. The living room suddenly felt different. Same couch, same table, same lamp that we bought on sale because it was modern, but actually looked like a confused mushroom. But now every object looked suspicious. The bookshelf? Suspicious. The plant? Suspicious. The smoke detector? Extremely suspicious. I've never trusted those. They just sit there, silently judging your cooking. I stood up and stretched, walked to the kitchen, grabbed water, walked back, sat down, normal, natural, completely unaware of being watched. Except now, I was very aware. The next morning she said, "You didn't sleep well?" I shrugged. "Why?" "You were up for a bit." There it was again, small, casual, too accurate. "Yeah," I said, "just couldn't get comfortable." She nodded. "You should stop using your phone before bed." "Are you giving me sleep advice now?" I'm giving you life advice. Dangerous territory. She smiled and sipped her coffee. I started testing things more deliberately. I kept replaying the house layout in my head. The only camera I knew about was near the front door. From there you could see, well, mostly the front door. Unless someone was teleporting, it couldn't explain everything. So either she had installed more, or she had trained a raccoon to report my movements. Both seemed equally likely at that point. I didn't search right away. That would have been too obvious. If she was checking the feeds live, she'd see me poking around like a paranoid detective. Instead, I played along. That night I sat on the couch and casually looked around again. This time I let my eyes linger on the bookshelf. If there was a camera, maybe she'd react. Nothing. Next day, "You looked tired yesterday," she said. "Did I?" "You stayed up late." "Yeah, couldn't sleep." She tilted her head slightly. "You were in the living room for a while." "There." Specific location again. I leaned back in my chair. "You're very observant." "I pay attention." That sentence sat between us for a second longer than it should have. I smiled. "Good to know." Inside, I was already mapping the room like I was planning a heist. Bookshelf, TV, corner lamp, decorative bowl that no one has ever used for anything except collecting dust. Everything looked innocent, which made it worse. I started noticing something else. She'd occasionally glance, not at me, but slightly past me, like she was checking something, or remembering something she'd already seen. Once, I deliberately stood still in the middle of the living room, doing nothing. She looked up from her phone. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Nothing. You're just standing there, trying something new." She shook her head and went back to her phone. The pattern was clear now. Too clear. Which meant there was only one thing left to do. Wait for her to leave. Because if there were cameras, I wasn't going to find them while she was watching. And I had a feeling. She was definitely watching. The opportunity came 2 days later. She was getting ready for work, moving around the bedroom while I pretended to scroll through my phone. In reality, I was paying attention to everything. Her bag, her keys, the time, the way she double-checked something on her screen. "You'll be home?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Calls all day." She nodded. "Try not to sit too long." I almost smiled at that. "I'll try to behave," I said. She leaned over, kissed my cheek, grabbed her bag, and left. The front door closed. I waited. A full 2 minutes. Because the last thing I wanted was her coming back for forgotten keys while I was halfway through dismantling the house like a confused burglar. I stood up. Step 1. Check the obvious. I walked to the front door camera, the official one, the one I was supposed to know about. I looked at it, then pulled out my phone. If there were more cameras, they were probably connected to the same app. People don't usually run 5 different surveillance systems unless they're guarding nuclear codes. I opened the app. There it was, the front door feed, and then a list. Device 1, front door device 2, living room device 3, hallway. I stared at the screen. "Well," I muttered, that escalated. My annoyance turned into something sharper. Not rage, not yet. Just that tight feeling in your chest when your suspicion gets confirmed. So not only was I right, she hadn't even hidden them well in the software. I tapped living room. The feed loaded. And there I was, from a slightly elevated angle, sitting on the couch from earlier that morning, looking exactly like a man who didn't know he was on camera. I exhaled slowly. "Okay," I said to the empty room. "That's not great." I tapped hallway. Another angle. Clear view. Every time I'd paced during calls. Every time I'd walked back and forth. So that's how she knew. Not intuition, not guessing, just surveillance. I locked the phone and stood still for a second. I had 2 options. Option 1, confront her immediately. Send a message. Blow it up. Option 2, find the cameras first. I chose option 2, because if she installed them, I wanted to see how far this went. I started with the living room. I looked around slowly. Now I knew the camera existed. The room felt completely different. Every object became a suspect. The bookshelf caught my attention first. It faced the couch directly. Perfect line of sight. I walked over casually, like I wasn't about to expose a hidden device. I ran my hand along the shelf. Books, small decorations, a photo frame, a tiny ceramic owl that we bought on vacation and never talked about again. Then I saw it. Small, black, tucked between two books. Not obvious. But once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. Seriously? I muttered. I leaned closer. Tiny lens, clean placement, a direct view of the couch. So this is where you've been, I said quietly. Next, hallway. That one took longer. The hallway was smaller, less cluttered, fewer hiding spots. I checked the corners, the top of the door frames, the smoke detector. Still suspicious. Then I noticed something near the coat rack. A small object mounted slightly higher than eye level. Another lens. Of course. This one pointed straight down the hallway, perfect for tracking movement, pacing, calls. I almost laughed. Very thorough, I said. I left it in place. By now, my annoyance had fully turned into determination, because this wasn't just for safety. This was intentional, planned, and I had a strong feeling. This wasn't just her idea. The way she'd laughed on the phone, the confidence, the tone, someone else was involved. I walked back into the living room and sat on the couch. Now I knew exactly where one of the cameras was. I looked directly at the bookshelf, held the gaze for a second, then leaned back casually. If they wanted a show, I was starting to write the script. I stayed on the couch for a minute, staring at the TV but not really watching anything. The bookshelf felt different now, not furniture, more like an audience. The rest of the afternoon I kept it subtle. A few extra pauses, standing still for no reason, looking around more than usual. Nothing dramatic, just slightly off. By the time I heard her keys in the door, I was back on the couch, watching something mindless and pretending everything was normal. She walked in, set her bag down, glanced at me. "Hey," she said. "Hey." She looked around the room briefly. Not obvious, just a quick scan. Then she went to change. We ate dinner about an hour later. Nothing fancy. Pasta. Silence at first, the usual clinking of forks. Then she looked at me. "You were home all day?" she asked. "Yeah," she nodded slowly. "Busy? Normal?" Another pause. "You seem different." I kept eating. "Different how?" "I don't know." She shrugged. "Just off." "Off?" "You've been moving around a lot." I looked up at her. "I live here. I'm allowed to move." She smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That's not what I mean." "What do you mean?" She hesitated. Just a fraction too long. "Nothing. Just, you seemed distracted." Maybe I was. She nodded again, studying me. I leaned back in my chair. "Why? Something wrong?" "No," she said quickly. "Just asking." She went back to her plate, but I could see it. The slight tension, the way she glanced at me once more, like she was trying to figure something out. Like she was wondering, did he find them? I kept my expression neutral, calm, no hint of anything. And as she turned away, I realized something important. She was nervous, not openly, not dramatically, but enough, which meant she knew something had shifted. And that was exactly what I wanted. The next couple of days passed quietly, but the air in the house felt different. She didn't bring up my strange behavior again, but I noticed small things. She checked her phone more often. Sometimes she typed quickly, then locked the screen when I walked into the room. Not dramatically, just casually, but enough to notice. I didn't push. I didn't ask. I kept playing normal. Until one afternoon, I went to grab a glass of water and heard her talking in the living room. Her voice was low, not whispering, but definitely not meant for me. "I don't know," she said. "He's just different." I slowed down without meaning to. "He's been moving around a lot, like he's looking for something." A pause. No, I didn't say anything. Another pause. I'm telling you, he might know. That landed hard. I stopped completely, just out of sight. He kept looking around yesterday, she continued. Like, I don't know, suspicious. She listened again, then sighed. I know. Maybe I'm overthinking it. But still, she gave a short laugh. Well, if he found them, he hasn't said anything. Another pause. Yeah, okay, I'll keep watching. She ended the call. I walked into the kitchen a second later, like I'd just arrived. Everything okay? I asked casually. She turned slightly. Yeah. Who were you talking to? Claire, she said without hesitation. I nodded. Claire, one of her closest friends, also someone who came over often, someone who'd been here enough to know the layout of the house. It's possible that other friends were involved, but so far I only knew about one. And suddenly the picture got clearer. This wasn't just her watching. This was shared. Claire wasn't just listening. She was involved. Probably watching too. Maybe more of them. I leaned against the counter. You two gossiping about me again? She smiled. Always. Should I be worried? Definitely. We both laughed. But inside, I was already connecting the dots, which meant there were viewers. That annoyed me more than the cameras themselves, because now I could practically imagine it. Oh, look, he's pacing again. He's on the couch. Do you think he suspects anything? I took a sip of water and nodded slowly. Hey, I said casually, we haven't had people over in a while. She looked up. No. Maybe we should invite your friends, dinner or something. She studied me carefully. Now? Let's do it on Friday. Why not? She hesitated just slightly. Who? Claire, obviously, I said, since you just talked to her, and the others. Make it a full house. She watched me for a second longer than usual. She smiled faintly. Okay, I can text them. Do it. She picked up her phone. As she typed, I leaned back and crossed my arms, pretending to be completely relaxed. Now I knew, and I was about to invite them all to the front row. After she sent the messages, nothing changed on the surface. Friday, 3 days, plenty of time. Too much time, actually. Because once the plan existed, I couldn't just sit still and wait. I needed to know how closely they were watching, whether it was occasional curiosity or full-blown reality TV. So I kept things normal, mostly. But I also started testing them. Small things. Harmless. Just enough to create ripples. The first test happened the next morning. I walked into the living room, looked straight at the shelf for half a second, then scratched my head and turned away. Like I thought I noticed something but wasn't sure. Day 2. I walked down the hallway, stopped directly under the camera, and checked my phone. Then I leaned against the wall for a few seconds and sighed, like someone deep in thought. And again, as if by accident, I looked straight into the camera and smiled. By day 3, I decided to push it a little further. Not obvious, not confrontational, just playful. I grabbed a sticky note from the kitchen drawer, bright yellow, hard to miss. For a second, I hesitated. Then I wrote, Well, enjoying the show? I stared at it. Too direct. I crossed it out. Wrote again. So, waiting for the next episode? Better. Still borderline. I rewrote one more time. Well, waiting for the show? Perfect. Ambiguous enough to look like a random joke. Clear enough to make anyone watching uncomfortable. I walked into the living room casually, like I was just cleaning. I placed the note on the coffee table, right in the center, facing the bookshelf. Then I sat down. I didn't look at it. Didn't react. Just scrolled through my phone. I imagined the other side. Someone noticing. Zooming in. Did he just... I stood up, stretched, and picked up the note again. Never mind, I muttered, like I'd changed my mind about something. I crumpled it and tossed it into the trash. The note didn't stay there for long, maybe 10 or 15 minutes. But if they were paying attention, they definitely saw it. That evening she was quieter than usual, not dramatically, just slightly distracted. At one point she asked, "You were cleaning earlier?" "Yeah." "You threw something away?" I looked up. "Probably." "Why?" She shook her head. "Nothing." I nodded slowly. Gotcha. They'd seen it. And now they were wondering, which meant Friday wasn't just my reveal anymore. They were already nervous. Perfect. Let them think about it. Let them wonder. Let them decide whether I knew. Because by the time they walked into my house for dinner, they'd already be on edge. Exactly where I wanted them. By Friday evening, I was done pretending this was still just weird. The house looked normal. Clean kitchen, candles my wife put out because apparently psychological manipulation pairs well with soft lighting, plates set on the table, low music playing in the background, like we were hosting a civilized adult dinner instead of an accidental reunion of amateur surveillance club. I was in the living room when the first bell rang. My wife smoothed the front of her shirt and looked at me. "You good?" she asked. I smiled. "Why wouldn't I be?" She held my gaze for a second too long. Then she went to open the door. Claire walked in first with a bottle of wine and the exact expression of someone trying very hard to look casual. "Hey," she said brightly. "Thanks for having us." "Of course," I said. "Wouldn't miss it." She laughed a little too fast. Behind her came Emma and Julia, both all smiles, all easy voices, all that polished dinner party energy people put on when they want to look relaxed and are absolutely not relaxed. Claire stepped into the living room and her eyes flicked for half a second toward the bookshelf. There it was. Tiny, fast, automatic. She caught herself right away and looked at me instead. Emma wandered a few steps toward the hallway, then stopped like she'd remembered she wasn't supposed to look interested in hallways. Julia stayed closest to my wife, which told me one of two things. Either she was the least involved or the smartest. Dinner started normally enough. Glasses clinked. Everyone sat down. My wife moved around the table with that controlled smile she used when she wanted a situation to stay manageable. Claire was talking too much. Emma was trying to fill every pause before it became awkward. Julia mostly listened. And me? I was having a fantastic time. Not visibly, of course. On the outside, I was calm, friendly, relaxed. On the inside, I was about 10 seconds away from standing up and hosting the weirdest documentary screening of their lives. Claire launched into a story about some woman at her office who sent an email to the entire company by mistake. And then, she said, already laughing at her own build-up, she tried to recall it, which obviously made everyone open it immediately. "That's the thing about people," I said, cutting in mildly. "The second they think they're not supposed to see something, they become obsessed with watching." The table went quiet for a beat. Just one beat. Tiny. But I saw it. My wife reached for her glass a little too quickly. Claire looked down. Emma gave a confused little smile, like she wasn't sure whether that was a joke or not. Julia glanced at my wife. Then Claire forced a laugh. "That's very true." "Oh, absolutely," I said, taking a sip of my drink. "Some people can't help themselves." My wife smiled at me. It was a warning smile. Soft. Controlled. "Don't." I smiled right back. Too late. A little later, Emma asked me, "So how's work been?" "Quiet," I said. "Mostly at home. Same rooms, same routine, same audience." Claire coughed on her wine. Actually coughed. Emma turned to her. "You okay?" "Yeah," Claire said quickly, dabbing at her mouth. "Went down wrong." "Too much observation," I said lightly. My wife set her fork down. "Can you pass the salt?" she asked me. I looked at her, then handed it over with a smile. Of course. That was the moment I knew for sure she was scared of where this was going. Good. Dinner dragged on for another 15 minutes, but nobody was really eating anymore. They were picking at food, drinking more than they meant to, laughing a little too quickly, avoiding certain topics. Every now and then, someone's eyes drifted somewhere they shouldn't. The shelf, the hallway. It was almost insulting how obvious they became once I knew what to look for. Finally, I leaned back in my chair, wiped my mouth with my napkin, and said very calmly, "You know what's funny? Nobody answered. I stood up. 4 faces turned toward me. My wife's smile vanished completely. "Funny thing about this room?" I said, looking around casually. "I used to think it was just a living room." No one moved. I stopped by the bookshelf. Claire went pale. I reached between the books and pulled out the camera. Small, black, familiar. I held it up between 2 fingers and turned back toward them. There was dead silence. Real silence. The kind that fills the whole house. Emma stared at it. Julia looked at my wife. Claire looked like she wanted the floor to open and swallow her whole. And my wife just sat there, perfectly still, with the expression of someone watching a bridge collapse in slow motion. I smiled. "Let's document this properly," I said. Then I walked to the dining table and set the camera down right in the center, lens facing them. Nobody spoke. I looked at Claire first, since she'd been kind enough to identify herself. "How long have you been watching?" I asked. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. What? I tilted my head. "Come on, Claire. Let's not waste the moment pretending you don't know what this is." Emma looked back and forth between us. "Wait. What is happening?" I pointed at the camera. "That," I said, "is one hidden cameras my wife installed in this house. One was aimed at the couch, one at the hallway, one at the front entrance, which at least had the decency to be mentioned." Emma's face changed immediately. Confusion first, then shock. Claire looked like she was trying to calculate whether sudden amnesia was legally possible. Julia said quietly, "Oh my God." My wife stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. "Can we talk privately?" "No," I said. "I've had enough private conversations I wasn't invited to." That landed exactly the way I wanted. Claire looked down. I picked up the camera from the table and pointed it at her face. "Let's try again," I said. "How long have you been watching?" "I wasn't watching," she stammered. I laughed, not loudly, just enough. My wife stepped toward me. "Put that down." "No, please." "No," I repeated, still looking at Claire. "You were on the phone when my wife said I was acting suspicious. She said I might know, so let's not insult each other by pretending you were just discussing the weather." Claire's eyes darted to my wife. There it was again, the instinctive check, the help me look. My wife closed her eyes for 1 second. That told me everything. I turned the camera toward Emma. "And you?" She held both hands up immediately. "I swear I didn't know there were cameras." "Interesting. That one sounded real." I studied her for a second, then lowered the camera slightly. "You never watched?" "No." "You never heard about it?" She hesitated. "There we go." "Heard about it isn't the same as participating," she said weakly. "Ah," I replied. "So you knew enough to not be surprised. Great start." Julia spoke next, voice quiet but steady. "I knew there was one by the front door, that's all." I looked at her. She looked genuinely horrified, not performative, not polished, just deeply uncomfortable. So Julia probably wasn't core cast, more like supporting damage. Claire, though? Claire was absolutely in the writer's room. I turned back to my wife and held up the camera again. "Anything you want to add?" She looked at me, then at the camera, then at her friends. Her shoulders dropped a little. Not guilt yet, just collapse. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she said. I nodded once. That's usually how terrible ideas begin. She exhaled shakily. "It started as a joke." I actually smiled at that. "Of course it did. It was just—" She stopped and rubbed her forehead. "It was something we saw online." My wife kept going, voice getting smaller now that she'd started. "There was this thread, this stupid discussion about how much men notice around the house, how predictable routines are, how people act differently when they think no one's paying attention. And your first thought," I said, "was to turn your husband into a lab rat." "No, it wasn't meant to hurt you." That almost made me laugh again. "I always enjoy that defense," I said. "I invaded your privacy in a deeply unsettling way, but emotionally I had good vibes." Then I looked around the room at every single face and finally said the thing I'd been saving. Hope you enjoyed the show. Now get out of my house. Emma stood up first, fast. No argument, no speech, just panic and shame colliding at once. I'm so sorry, she said, and I actually believed she meant it, though I wasn't in a charitable mood. Julia got up after her, face pale. I should go. Claire stayed seated half a second longer, like her brain was still buffering. Then she stood too. I didn't think clearly, I said. That shut her up. The three of them scrambled for bags, phones, shoes, dignity, not necessarily in that order. At the door, Claire turned back like she wanted to say one last thing. Maybe an apology, maybe an excuse, maybe some watered-down version of "it got out of hand." I looked at her. She thought better of it and left. The door closed. The house went quiet. Just me, my wife, hidden camera on the dinner table, half-finished pasta, and the smell of candle wax trying heroically to make the room seem normal. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. Then she whispered, "I'm sorry." I looked at the cameras, then at her. "I'm really sorry," she said again, quieter this time. "It got out of hand. It was stupid. I shouldn't have done it." I didn't answer right away. "Yeah," I said calmly. "It was." She took a step closer. "I didn't think you'd find them. I mean, I don't ever want to see something like this again. No experiments, no games, no audience." I interrupted. "I understand." I held her gaze. "Next time, I won't be this calm. Next time, the papers are ready." She swallowed and nodded. "Okay, it won't happen again." A week later, the house felt normal again. The cameras were gone. The bookshelf was just a bookshelf. The hallway was just a hallway. No more invisible audience, no more second-guessing where I stood or how long I sat on the couch. She was quieter for a few days. Careful. Overly considerate even. Small things. Asking before changing anything in the house. Leaving her phone face up, like transparency had suddenly become a hobby. I didn't bring it up again. There wasn't much left to say. One evening I sat on the couch, grabbed a bag of chips, and opened it loudly on purpose. Old habit. Then I caught myself and laughed. No one was watching. Just me. I leaned back, turned on the TV, and stretched out across the couch. Peaceful. Finally. And for the first time in a week, the living room felt like a living room again. Not a set, not an experiment, not a show. Just a place where a guy could sit, eat chips, and not worry about an audience. Exactly how it should have been from the start. If you felt this story hit hard, drop a like, subscribe for more, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support keeps Steelheart beating.